The morning mist clung to the towering pine trees surrounding Cross Estate, like ghostly fingers, refusing to let go. In isolation, behind its wrought iron gates and stone walls, lived Sebastian Cross, the enigmatic billionaire who had built a tech empire before retreating from the world entirely. But it was not Sebastian who commanded the most fear and respect. On the estate, that honor belonged to Thunder, a massive Rottweiler mix whose presence could silence a room with a single growl. Standing nearly 3 feet tall, with muscles rippling beneath his black and tan coat, Thunder bore the scars of a past that no one dared to question. His eyes held a darkness that seemed to reflect the pain of 1,000 betrayals. The kennel where Thunder lived was built like a fortress within a fortress. Steel-reinforced concrete walls rose 12 feet high, topped with security cameras that monitored his every movement. The door was triple-locked, accessible only to those brave enough to enter his domain. In the 6 months since his arrival, Thunder had sent for professional dog trainers to the hospital. The last one, a renowned behaviorist from Switzerland, had left with 17 stitches and a sworn oath never to return. The challenge that shook the world, Sebastian Cross, had always been a man of few words, but when he spoke, the world listened. That crisp October morning, he stood before the assembled staff of his estate, his silver hair catching the filtered sunlight streaming through the windows of the main house. His weathered hands gripped a crystal tumbler filled with black coffee, and his steel-gray eyes held a determination that had built empires and crushed competitors. $5 million, he announced, his voice carrying across the silent room. $5 million to anyone who can help Thunder trust again. The groundskeepers exchanged glances. The security team shifted uncomfortably. Everyone knew this was not about money. Sebastian Cross could buy and sell small countries, but he could not purchase what Thunder needed most. Healing Dr. Rebecca Stone, the estate's veterinarian, stepped forward. She had been working with Thunder for 3 months. Armed with every modern technique and pharmaceutical intervention available, "Sir, with respect, some damage cannot be undone. Thunder's trauma runs deeper than any training can reach." Sebastian's jaw tightened. "Then we find someone who understands trauma from the inside out." The announcement spread beyond the estate, walls like wildfire. Within hours, news crews gathered at the gates. Social media exploded with theories and speculation. Professional trainers from around the globe submitted applications. Celebrity animal behaviorists offered their services. But Sebastian Cross had learned long ago that sometimes the most profound solutions came from the most unexpected places. The girl who lived in shadows, 40 miles away. In the concrete maze of downtown Portland, Alina Moreau crouched beneath the rusted fire escape of an abandoned warehouse. At 12 years old, she had mastered the art of becoming invisible. Now her dark hair hung in tangled waves around a face that had learned to show no emotion. No vulnerability that could be exploited by those who preyed on the weak. Alina had been living on the streets for 8 months, ever since the foster system had failed her for the final time. She survived by cleaning car windows at red lights, returning shopping carts for loose change, and sleeping in doorways when the shelters were full. Her possessions fit in a torn backpack, a change of clothes, a water bottle with a crack down the side, and a small notebook where she wrote her thoughts in careful script. The city had taught her harsh lessons. Trust was a luxury she could not afford. Kindness often came with hidden costs. Adults made promises they never intended to keep. But Alina had also learned that silence could be more powerful than screaming, that patience could outlast aggression, that sometimes the most broken souls recognized each other across impossible distances. On this particular morning, as she sat sorting through discarded newspapers for anything useful, she overheard 2 construction workers discussing the Billionaire's challenge. Their voices carried on the wind as they stood near their truck, sharing coffee and gossip. $5 million for a dog, one laughed. Must be nice to have that kind of money to throw around. Not just any dog, the other replied. My cousin works. Security up there says this animal is pure nightmare. Tore up a grown man like he was made of paper. Lena's hand stilled on the newspaper. Something in the story called to her, a recognition that went beyond words. She had seen that look in her own eyes, reflected in broken mirrors and storefront windows. The look of something that had been hurt so badly, it would rather fight the world than risk being hurt again that night. As she lay curled in her sleeping bag beneath an overpass, Alina made a decision that would change everything. She would find this dog, this Thunder. Not for the money, but for the understanding that passed between the wounded and the lost. The decision that changed everything the next morning. Alina began her research. She visited the public library, using the computers to learn everything she could about Sebastian Cross and his estate. She studied maps, calculated distances, and planned her route with the precision of a military strategist. Sebastian Cross, she discovered, was not just wealthy, but legendary. The youngest son of a middle-class family from Oregon had built Cross Industries from nothing, revolutionizing cloud computing and artificial intelligence. His innovations had changed how the world worked, but success had come at a price. He had never married, had few friends, and had become increasingly reclusive after a scandal involving stolen technology. Had nearly destroyed his company 5 years earlier. But it was a single photograph that captured Elena's attention. Buried in an old magazine article, she found a picture of a young Sebastian Cross standing beside a girl who looked remarkably like him. The caption read, "Sebastian Cross with his sister Margaret at the Cross Industries headquarters. 2019. The girl had kind eyes and a gentle smile, but there was something in Sebastian's expression as he looked at her that spoke of fierce protectiveness. Alina spent hours studying that photograph, recognizing something familiar in the way Sebastian's arms circled his sister's shoulders. It was the same way she had once protected the younger children in her various foster homes, the same desperate need to shield someone innocent from a world that did not understand gentleness. The journey begins on the third day. Alina packed her meager belongings and began the long walk toward Cross Estate. She had no money for transportation, no connections to ease her way. Only a determination that burned brighter than hunger or exhaustion. The city gave way to suburbs, then to farmland, and finally to the winding mountain roads that led to the estate. She walked for hours, her feet blistering in shoes that had long since lost their soles. Cars passed without stopping, their drivers too busy or too suspicious to offer help to a young girl walking alone. As the sun began to set, Alina reached the first sign of her destination, a weathered wooden marker that read Cross Estate, private property. Beyond it, the road curved upward through dense forest, disappearing into shadows that seemed to swallow the last light of day. Her body ached, her stomach cramped with hunger, and her clothes were soaked with sweat and rain. Alina pressed forward, driven by an understanding that went beyond logic. Somewhere ahead, in the darkness of those woods, waited a creature as broken and alone as she was. And maybe, just maybe, they could help each other find their way back to something resembling trust. The iron gates of Cross Estate loomed before her like the entrance to another world. Through the bars, she could see manicured lawns, elegant buildings, and the kind of perfection that money could buy. But Alina was not intimidated by wealth or grandeur. She had learned that the most important things could not be purchased, only earned through patience, understanding, and the willingness to sit with pain until it began to heal. As she approached the intercom system beside the gate, Alina took a deep breath and prepared to speak the words that would either open the door to her future or close it forever. Behind her, the city lights twinkled like distant stars. Ahead lay the unknown, dangerous and full of possibility. In the distance, somewhere within the estate grounds, Thunder lifted his massive head as if sensing a presence that spoke his language. For the first time in months, his growl carried a note of curiosity rather than pure aggression. The girl who understood brokenness was coming home. The intercom crackled to life as Alina pressed the worn button with a trembling finger. Static filled the air for several seconds before a gruff voice emerged from the speaker, tinged with the weariness of someone who had dealt with too many curiosity seekers and fortune hunters. "This is private property. State your business or move along." Alina cleared her throat, her voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Elena Moreau. I'm here about Thunder." A long pause followed. Through the ornate iron bars, she could see a figure, moving in the guardhouse, silhouetted against the warm glow of interior lights. The man who emerged was tall and broad-shouldered, his uniform crisp despite the late hour. James Fletcher had been head of security at Cross Estate for 12 years, and in that time he had seen everything from corporate spies to obsessed fans. But he had never seen anything quite like the small figure standing before his gates. "You're just a kid," he said, his voice softer now, but still cautious. "Where are your parents?" Lena's fingers tightened around the straps of her backpack. "I don't have any. I heard about the challenge, and I think I can help." James studied her through the bars, taking in her worn clothes, her tangled hair, and the quiet desperation in her dark eyes. He had daughters of his own, safe in their beds in the nearby town, and something about this girl's situation tugged at his conscience. "Look, sweetheart, I appreciate your interest, but Thunder isn't a pet. He's dangerous. We've had professional trainers with decades of experience leave here in ambulances." "I know," Elena replied simply. "But sometimes the most broken things recognize each other." There was something in her voice, a quality that James had heard only once before, in the voice of Sebastian Cross himself on the day Thunder had first arrived. It was the sound of someone who had been shattered and had somehow found the strength to keep existing, one breath at a time. The night watch James Fletcher was not a man given to impulsive decisions, but something about Elena's presence unsettled him in ways he could not explain. Instead of sending her away, he found himself opening a small side gate and gesturing for her to approach the guardhouse. "You can't sleep out here," he said, his professional demeanor cracking slightly. "Supposed to drop below freezing tonight." Elena followed him into the small building, which was equipped with monitors showing various views of the estate grounds. She settled into a chair beside the desk, her backpack clutched protectively in her lap. "Tell me about Thunder," she said. Quietly, James poured himself a cup of coffee from a thermos and offered her a sandwich from his dinner bag. Elena accepted it gratefully, eating in small, careful bites that spoke of long familiarity with hunger. "He arrived 6 months ago," James began, his eyes fixed on the monitors. "Mr. Cross found him at a dog-fighting ring that was being shut down by the authorities. The dog was scheduled to be put down because of his aggression, but something about him reminded Mr. Cross of his sister's dog from years ago." Elena looked up from her sandwich. "His sister?" "Margaret Cross. She died in a car accident 3 years ago. She was the only family Mr. Cross had left, and her death changed him. He became even more isolated, more protective of the few things he cared about." On one of the monitors, Elena could see a distant view of the kennels. Even in the darkness, she could make out the reinforced structure where Thunder was housed, separate from the other dogs on the estate. "What happened to him?" she asked. "To Thunder, I mean?" James's expression darkened. "The fighting ring kept detailed records. Thunder was stolen from a family when he was just a puppy. They used him as a bait dog at first, teaching the aggressive dogs to attack. When he grew larger and stronger, they tried to make him fight, but he was too gentle. So they broke him, piece by piece, until he became what they wanted." Elena's hands stilled on her sandwich. She understood now why she had felt such a pull toward this story. Thunder's journey from innocence to trauma to survival mirrored her own path through the foster system and onto the streets. "Not really aggressive," she said softly. "He's just afraid." James nodded. "That's what Dr. Stone keeps saying. But knowing it and fixing it are two different things." The test of faith as dawn broke over the estate. Elena remained in the guardhouse, watching the monitors as the grounds came to life. Groundskeepers tended to the gardens, staff members moved between buildings, and in the distance she could see a figure walking alone across the main lawn. "That's him," James said, following her gaze. "Mr. Cross takes the same walk every morning at exactly 6:30. Elena studied the distant figure. Even from far away, she could see the rigid posture, the deliberate isolation of a man who had learned to trust no one. Sebastian Cross moved through his own property like a ghost, present but not truly participating in the world around him. "I need to see Thunder," Elena said suddenly. James turned from the monitors. "That's not going to happen. Mr. Cross would have to approve any contact, and he's not going to risk a child's safety. Then ask him. Alina, you need to understand something. Mr. Cross doesn't just let people onto his property. He's been burned by reporters, by people trying to exploit his grief, by fortune hunters who think they can solve his problems for a price. He's not going to trust a homeless girl who showed up at his gates. Lena stood up, her small frame somehow conveying a strength that surprised James. Then I'll wait until he does. The vigil for 3 days, Alina remained at the estate gates. James had tried to convince her to leave, had even offered to drive her to a shelter in town, but she refused to abandon her post. She slept in the guardhouse, ate sparingly from the meals James shared with her, and spent her days watching the estate grounds through the security monitors. On the second day, Dr. Rebecca Stone arrived for her weekly session with Thunder. Alina watched through the cameras as the veterinarian approached the kennel with her usual equipment, sedatives, protective gear, and a collection of training tools that had proven useless against Thunder's particular brand of trauma. The session lasted less than 20 minutes. Alina could see Thunder's massive form pacing frantically in his enclosure, his body language speaking of panic and rage. Dr. Stone emerged, shaking her head, her face pale with exhaustion and frustration. Another failure, James muttered, watching the monitor. She's approaching him like he's a problem to be solved, Alina observed. But he's not broken. He's just forgotten how to trust. On the third day, word of Elena's vigil had spread among the estate staff. Robert Chen, the head groundskeeper, stopped by the guardhouse during his morning rounds. He was a man in his 60s who had worked on the estate since before Sebastian Cross's rise to fame, and his quiet wisdom had earned him a unique position of respect among the staff. "She's still here," he said to James, glancing at Alina through the window. "She won't leave. Says she's going to wait until Mr. Cross agrees to let her try with Thunder." Robert studied Alina for a long moment. "Now, there's something about her that reminds me of Miss Margaret. She had that same quiet determination, that same way of seeing through to the heart of things." The breakthrough it was Robert Chen, who finally convinced Sebastian Cross to meet with Alina. The billionaire had been growing increasingly agitated as reports of the girl's presence reached him. He had dealt with publicity stunts before, but something about this situation felt different, more personal. "She's not going away, sir," Robert said during their morning meeting in the estate's main office. "And frankly, I think you should hear what she has to say." Sebastian's fingers drummed against his mahogany desk. "She's a child, Robert. This isn't a game. Neither is Thunder's suffering," Robert replied gently. "And neither is yours." The words hit Sebastian like a physical blow. In all his years of wealth and success, few people had dared to speak to him with such directness. But Robert Chen had known him since before the fortune, before the isolation, and his perspective carried weight that others could not. That afternoon, Sebastian Cross walked to the estate gates for the first time in 2 years. Lena was sitting on a small bench beside the guardhouse, her notebook open in her lap, writing in careful script. She looked up as he approached, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Sebastian saw a girl who could not have been more than 12 or 13, with dark hair that needed washing and clothes that had seen better days. But her eyes held something that surprised him, not desperation or greed, but a quiet understanding that seemed far older than her years. "You're the one who's been waiting," he said, his voice carefully neutral. Alina nodded. "My name is Alina. Moreau, I'm here about Thunder. What makes you think you can help him when trained professionals have failed?" Alina closed her notebook and stood up, her small frame somehow conveying dignity despite her circumstances. "Because I know what it's like to be hurt so badly that you'd rather fight than trust. I know what it's like to have everyone give up on you because they think you're too broken to fix." Sebastian felt something shift in his chest, a recognition that went beyond words. "And you think that qualifies you to work with a dangerous animal?" "I think it qualifies me to understand him," Alina replied. "Thunder isn't dangerous because he wants to be. He's dangerous because he's afraid. Fear makes us do things we never thought we were capable of." The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of shared understanding. Sebastian Cross had built walls around himself, just as surely as Thunder had built walls around his heart. Both of them had learned that isolation was safer than vulnerability, that attacking first was better than risking betrayal. "One chance," Sebastian said finally. "Tomorrow morning, supervised with full safety precautions. If there's any sign of aggression, The session ends immediately. Elena's eyes brightened, but she simply nodded. Thank you. As Sebastian walked back toward the main house, he found himself thinking about Margaret, about the way she had always believed in second chances, in the possibility of healing even the most wounded souls. Maybe, just maybe, this strange girl who had appeared at his gates carried some echo of that same faith. Behind him, Lena sat back down on the bench and opened her notebook again. Tomorrow, she would meet Thunder. And together, they would begin the slow process of remembering what it meant to trust. The sun had barely crested the hills. Surrounding Cross Estate, when Alina woke in the small guest room James Fletcher had arranged for her in the staff quarters, she had spent the night staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with thoughts of the encounter ahead. Through her window, she could see the reinforced kennel in the distance, stark reminder of the challenge that awaited her. Sebastian Cross had not slept at all, stood in his study, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the estate grounds. Nursing his third cup of black coffee, on his desk lay a photograph he rarely allowed himself to look at Margaret at age 10, kneeling beside a golden retriever named Sunshine. The dog had been gentle, trusting, everything that Thunder was not. Yet something about Elena's quiet confidence reminded him of his sister's unwavering faith in the goodness of all living creatures. Dr. Rebecca Stone arrived early, her medical bag filled with sedatives and emergency supplies. She had argued against allowing Alina near Thunder, but Sebastian's word was final. Robert Chen stood nearby, his weathered hands clasped behind his back, while James Fletcher checked and rechecked the safety protocols they had established. Moment I see any sign of aggression, we intervene, Dr. Stone said for the third time. No heroics, no second chances. Sebastian nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on the kennel where Thunder paced in endless circles. His massive frame a testament to power barely contained. The first meeting, Alina approached the kennel with deliberate slowness, her feet making soft sounds on the gravel path. She wore the same clothes she had arrived in, having refused the offers of new garments from the estate staff. Thunder, she understood, needed to see her as she truly was, not cleaned up or dressed to impress, but real and unvarnished. The kennel itself was larger than most apartments Alina had lived in. Steel mesh formed the walls and ceiling, while concrete flooring provided easy cleaning. In the center sat Thunder, his dark eyes fixed on the approaching group with an intensity that made even the security guards nervous as they drew closer. Thunder rose to his full height. His shoulders reached Elena's chest, and his weight easily exceeded 120 pounds. Scars crisscrossed his muzzle and legs, evidence of the battles he had been forced to fight. But it was his eyes that captured Elena's attention, not the fierce gaze everyone else saw, but the deep well of pain that lay beneath the surface. He's magnificent, Elena whispered, causing Dr. Stone to glance at her in surprise. Sebastian felt something twist in his chest. Those were almost the exact words Margaret had used when describing every wounded animal she had ever encountered. The language of understanding, Lena approached the kennel gate, while the others remained at a safe distance. Thunder immediately moved to the far corner, his body low and coiled like a spring. A low growl rumbled from his chest. But Alina noticed something the others missed. His tail was not raised in dominance, but tucked slightly, sign of uncertainty rather than pure aggression. "Hello, Thunder," she said softly, settling into a cross-legged position on the ground outside the gate. "I'm Alina." The growling intensified, and Dr. Stone stepped forward. "This isn't working. We should sedate him first," Lena said without taking her eyes off Thunder. "He's not angry. He's scared." For 20 minutes, Alina sat perfectly still while Thunder paced and growled. The estate staff shifted restlessly, but Sebastian found himself transfixed by the girl's patience. She did not try to coax Thunder closer, did not make sudden movements or speak in the high-pitched tones that most people used with animals. She simply existed in his presence, radiating a calm that seemed to penetrate even Thunder's thick walls of defense. Gradually, Thunder's pacing slowed. His growls became less frequent, replaced by heavy breathing and the occasional whine. Lena began to speak, her voice barely audible to the watching adults. "I know you're tired of being afraid," she murmured. "I know you're tired of fighting just to survive. I know what it's like when everyone expects you to be something you're not." Thunder stopped pacing and stared at her directly. For the first time since his arrival at the estate, his body language shifted from defensive to curious. The moment of recognition, Alina slowly reached into her pocket and withdrew a small piece of bread she had saved from breakfast. She placed it on the ground near the gate and moved her hand away, making no attempt to lure Thunder closer. "Make you do anything," she continued. "I'm not here to fix you or train you or change you into something more convenient. I'm just here to sit with you, if you'll let me." Thunder's nostrils flared as he caught the scent of the bread. His eyes moved between Alina and the offering, his massive body tense with indecision. Everyone held their breath as he took one cautious step forward, then another. When Thunder reached the bread, he was close enough to touch Alina through the mesh. Instead of grabbing the food and retreating, he settled into a sitting position and ate slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. "May I touch you?" Alina asked, extending her hand toward the mesh. Thunder's ears twitched forward, and after a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, he leaned closer. Elena's fingers made contact with his scarred muzzle through the steel mesh. And something extraordinary happened. Thunder's eyes closed. For the first time in months, the tension drained from his massive frame. A soft whine escaped his throat. Not of fear or aggression, but of something that sounded remarkably like relief. "The breakthrough opened the gate," Elena said quietly. "Absolutely not," Dr. Stone protested. "This is as far as we go." Elena turned to look at Sebastian, her dark eyes holding a certainty that defied her years. "He won't hurt me. He's remembering what it feels like to trust." Sebastian stared at the unlikely pair, the small girl and the massive dog, separated by steel but connected by something deeper than physical barriers. Margaret's voice echoed in his memory. "Sometimes love requires faith, Sebastian. Sometimes you have to trust. Before you have proof, open it," said. James Fletcher's hand shook as he unlocked the multiple latches securing the gate. Dr. Stone prepared a sedative dart, while Robert Chen moved closer with a restraint pole. Ow. But Alina had already stepped inside the enclosure. And Thunder had not moved from his sitting position. The girl and the dog regarded each other in the sudden silence. Then Alina slowly lowered herself to the ground, sitting cross-legged just an arm's length away from Thunder. For long moments, neither moved. Then Thunder did something that brought tears to Sebastian's eyes. He lay down and rested his massive head on Elena's lap. "Hello, beautiful boy," Elena whispered, her small hand stroking the scarred fur of his neck. "You're safe now. We're both safe now." What happened next defied everything the experts had predicted. Thunder, the dog who had terrorized trainers and veterinarians, began to relax in ways no one had seen since his arrival. His breathing slowed, his muscles unclenched, and for the first time in months, he seemed to remember what peace felt like. Alina sat with him for over an hour, speaking in soft tones about her life on the streets, her fears, her dreams. Thunder listened with the intensity of someone who had forgotten what human kindness sounded like. Occasionally, his tail would give the faintest wag, a sign that something inside him was beginning to thaw. "It's not about dominance or submission," Alina explained to the watching adults. "It's about recognition. Thunder and I, we've both learned that the world can be cruel. We've both had to build walls to survive. But walls that keep pain out also keep love out." Sebastian found himself thinking about his own walls, the barriers he had constructed around his heart after Margaret's death. How long had it been since he had allowed himself to be truly vulnerable with another person? When Alina finally stood to leave the enclosure, Thunder followed her to the gate. He did not try to escape, but neither did he retreat to his corner. Instead, he sat directly beside the mesh, his nose pressed against the steel, as if trying to maintain contact with the girl who had shown him that gentleness still existed in the world. The new beginning that evening, Sebastian Cross made a decision. That surprised everyone, including himself. He invited Alina to join him for dinner in the main house. The first time in 3 years, that he had shared a meal with another person. The dining room was elegant, but somehow lonely. With its long table, designed for dinner parties that never happened, and its crystal chandelier that reflected light onto empty chairs. Alina sat across from Sebastian, her small frame dwarfed by the ornate setting, but her presence somehow filling the space with warmth. "Tell me about yourself," Sebastian said, cutting into his steak with careful precision. Alina looked up from her soup. The first hot meal she had eaten in weeks. "There's not much to tell. I've been in foster care since I was 5. The last family I stayed with decided they didn't want me anymore 8 months ago. I've been on my own since then. And you're not angry about that?" Lena considered the question. "Carefully. I was angry for a long time. But anger is exhausting when you're just trying to survive. I learned that accepting things I couldn't change gave me more energy to work on things I could change." Sebastian set down his fork, struck by the wisdom in her simple words. "Is that what you did with Thunder? Accepted him as he was?" "Thunder isn't broken," Elena said firmly. "He's just hurt. There's a difference. Broken things can't be fixed, but hurt things can heal if they're given the right environment." As if summoned by their conversation, a soft whining could be heard. From the direction of the kennels, Thunder was calling for Alina, the first sound of longing rather than aggression that anyone had heard from him. "He's asking for you," Sebastian said, with something approaching wonder. Alina smiled. The first truly joyful expression Sebastian had seen from her. He's remembering what it feels like to miss someone. That's the first step toward loving someone. The promise of tomorrow later that night. Sebastian found Alina sitting on the terrace outside her room, looking toward the kennels where Thunder waited. The billionaire approached carefully, still learning how to navigate this new dynamic of trust and vulnerability. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, "about hurt things healing in the right environment." Alina looked up at him, her dark eyes reflecting the stars overhead. Thunder needs stability. Needs to know that the people he's learning to trust won't disappear. "And what do you need, Elena?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy. With possibility, Elena had spent so long focused on survival that she had almost forgotten about dreams, about hopes for a future beyond the next meal or the next safe place to sleep. "I need to know that I belong somewhere," she said finally. "I need to know that I'm not just passing through, that I'm not just useful until something better comes along." Sebastian felt something crack inside his chest, the sound of walls beginning to crumble. "What if I told you that you could stay here permanently, that you could go to school, have your own room, be part of something lasting?" Elena's eyes widened. "What about Thunder?" "Thunder needs you," Sebastian said simply. "And maybe, just maybe, I need you both." In the distance, Thunder's whining had stopped. For the first time in months, the estate was filled with peaceful silence, the kind that came not from emptiness, but from completion. 6 months later, the transformation of Cross Estate was nothing short of miraculous. Alina had enrolled in the local school, where her quiet intelligence and gentle nature had quickly won over teachers and classmates alike. She maintained a careful routine with Thunder, spending hours each day simply being present with him, helping him relearn the rhythms of trust and affection. Thunder himself had become a different creature entirely. The aggression that had once defined him had been replaced by a calm confidence that amazed everyone who witnessed it. He no longer needed to be confined to his reinforced kennel, but roamed freely around the estate grounds, never straying far from Elena's side. Dr. Rebecca Stone had documented Thunder's progress in what would become a groundbreaking study on trauma, recovery, and animals. But she knew that the real breakthrough had nothing to do with her. Professional techniques and everything to do, the mysterious alchemy that occurred when two wounded souls recognized each other. Sebastian Cross had changed. As well, the isolated billionaire who had once hidden behind walls of wealth and suspicion had begun to engage with the world again. He started a foundation dedicated to helping traumatized animals and at-risk children, inspired by the understanding that healing often came not from experts or institutions, but from the simple act of one broken thing caring for another. The circle. Complete in a warm spring morning, exactly 1 year after Elena's arrival at Cross Estate. Sebastian stood in the garden watching her teach Thunder a new trick. The massive dog sat attentively as she demonstrated what she wanted. his tail wagging with the enthusiasm of someone who had rediscovered joy. Robert Chen joined Sebastian on the terrace, both men marveling at the scene before them. "You know," Robert said thoughtfully, "Miss Margaret would have loved this." Sebastian nodded, feeling the familiar pang of loss that no longer threatened to overwhelm him. She always believed that the most important things couldn't be bought or trained or forced. They had to be chosen freely and repeatedly until they became as natural as breathing. As if sensing their conversation, Alina looked up and waved. Thunder immediately bounded over to them, no longer the fearsome creature who had terrorized the estate, but a gentle giant who had learned to trust again. "You did something extraordinary," Sebastian told Alina as she approached. "You saved him." Alina scratched behind Thunder's ears, her face serious as she considered his words. "I don't think I saved him. I think we saved each other." In the months that followed, Alina's story would spread far beyond the walls of Cross Estate. Would call it a miracle. Experts would analyze the techniques she had used. Other traumatized animals would benefit from the insights her experience had provided. But for Alina, the most important transformation was the simplest one. For the first time in her life, she had found a place where she was not just tolerated or temporarily useful, but genuinely beloved. She had discovered that healing was not a destination but a journey, one best traveled in the company of others, who understood the courage it took to trust again. Thunder, for his part, had learned that not all humans were sources of pain and betrayal. Some, like the small girl who had sat with him in his darkest moments, were capable of extraordinary patience and love. He had traded his armor of aggression for the vulnerability of affection, and found that the exchange had made him not weaker, but infinitely stronger, and Sebastian Cross. The man who had thought his capacity for love had died with his sister, discovered that the human heart was far more resilient than he had believed. In saving Thunder and Alina, he had ultimately saved himself, proving that sometimes the most profound acts of rescue happened when broken people chose to care for other broken things. The estate that had once been a fortress of isolation had become a sanctuary of healing, where three unlikely souls had found their way back to the fundamental truth that Margaret Cross had always known that love, once lost, could always be found again, often in the most unexpected places and forms. As the sun set over the Organ Hills, Alina sat in the garden with Thunder's head in her lap and Sebastian reading nearby. They were no longer three separate beings carrying their pain in isolation, but a family bound together by the understanding that healing was not just possible, but inevitable when approached with patience, courage, and an unwavering belief in the power of second chances. The story that had begun with a challenge to tame an untamable dog had become something far more profound, a testament to the truth that the most wounded hearts often hold the greatest capacity for love, and that sometimes the best way to heal yourself is to help heal someone else. The end.